You're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much for coming to Colorado. I want to start by lending my thanks to all of you and to the people that work for you. While Putin was lying to us and to the Ukrainians and his own people, your people were ascertaining the truth, and we were warning the world, and that could not have happened without the work that you've done. So I deeply, deeply appreciate it. We were on the phone on Saturday, most of us, I guess, with President Zelensky. He started the call by saying, we're just fighting to be able to live our lives like you. And he ended the call by saying the world should live in peace, the world should live in a pluralistic way, by which he meant with freedom of speech, freedom of religion, self-determination, and that's what's at stake here. And I think we've got a chance to win this fight in part because of the people that work for all of you. So I want to say thank you. Director Haynes, Putin's aggression against Ukraine and against international rules and norms demonstrates the urgency of maintaining American superiority in emerging domains, including space and cyber, two domains that really I think the American people have not heard enough about. Last week, as the chairman mentioned, he joined me in Colorado for a series of briefings with Space Command, the National Space Defense Center, and NRO leadership. Our conversation reinforced for me that our military and intelligence community missions are inextricably linked, and we are concerned that the decision to relocate Space Command does not fully account for the intelligence community missions that are in Colorado, the depth of the private sector, which is so critical to building resilience in space. It's my view that we should be spending money on the mission in space, not on moving Space Command and starting from scratch. Could you explain how strengthening the integration of our military and intelligence missions is critical to maintaining our superiority in space?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree more with the overall sentiment, which is that we have to integrate these areas. I do think that, it's a domain in which obviously the Defense Department, but also other parts of the government, such as NASA and so on, are occupying, and it's increasingly crowded with commercial satellites as well, and all of us have to be able to integrate together in order to effectively manage things, but no two entities more, I suppose, than the Department of Defense and the IC in order for us to do our jobs. And as we've been doing, we have a number of mechanisms that we use for that kind of coordination. There's, obviously the Joint Space Warfighter Forum, which, has the U.S. Spacecom commander and the NRO director as sort of co-chairs and leading of that, and that's a kind of an example of DoD and the IC coming together on these issues. And we have a number of other things, Space XCOM, a National Space Defense Center, an integrated protection strategy that are intended to do this. I would just say that, as I know you already know, but just to acknowledge it, like we have work to do in this area to make sure that, frankly, as compartmented as some aspects of our work is, that we integrate that as well effectively so that we can actually work across this domain in a sensible and sort of strategic way, and really appreciate your support and others for this area because I think it's obviously critically important to our future.
We heard some unbelievable things while we were there, but which obviously we can't talk about in open session, but it is very clear, I think the chairman would agree with this assessment, that we do not have a moment to lose here in space. I just have a minute left. Director Burns, could I just ask you to talk a little bit while we're in public session, just give the American people a sense of how Russia is using disinformation across the world, how it's using it in its own country, but also how it's using it across the democracies to try to pit us against one another, divide us from one another. These are things that appear to the American people sometimes to look like just another person's Twitter feed, when in fact the Russians can be behind it. So could you spend a minute on that?
Sure. Thanks, Senator. And I'll focus on, the ways in which I think President Putin has worked methodically over the last 2 decades to turn Russian society into a kind of propaganda bubble. I mean, he's used financial pressures, he's used lethal actions. I remember vividly when I was ambassador in Russia, some years ago, going to the funeral of a very courageous independent Russian journalist named Anna Politkovskaya in the fall of 2006. And that's just one part of the pressure that he's brought against open information in Russia. He's intensified his domination of the state-run media and in his strangulation of independent media, especially in recent years, and particularly since the invasion of Ukraine began. But I guess the last thing I'd say is I don't believe that he's going to be able to seal Russians off entirely from the truth. There are lots of Russians who have VPN accounts, who have access to YouTube to this day, who have access to information. And I don't believe he can wall off indefinitely Russians from the truth, especially as realities begin to puncture that bubble. The realities of killed and wounded coming home, an increasing number. The realities of the economic consequences for ordinary Russians, as I was discussing before. The realities of the horrific scenes of hospitals and schools being bombed next door in Ukraine and of civilian casualties there as well. I don't think he can bottle up the truth indefinitely.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Cotton, thank you as well also for your constant willingness to press this committee and, frankly, the IC leadership to make sure, both on the unclassified and classified section, the collaboration between the DoD projects and the IC projects. Senator Cotton.